At my daughter's recital, my ex-husband's lawyer served me papers. Full custody. You're unfit. I was in the front row. My daughter saw everything. I stood up calmly and said, "Tell your client I have the drug test results from last week," and the arrest record he sealed. The scent of cheap hairspray and pre-performance anxiety hung thick in the auditorium of the Northwood Academy of Dance. The lights dimmed at exactly $7, $2 p.m. I was sitting in the center of the third row, the best seat in the house, watching the curtain twitch. I had spent $1,200 on the season ticket package, $350 on the velvet dress I was wearing, and $95 on the floral arrangement waiting backstage. This was my $9 every-year-old daughter, Chloe's annual recital. She was the sugar plum fairy this year. For me, this was not just a performance. It was a sacred, non-negotiable event. I was a $40-year-old VP of operations for a major biopharma firm, and my life was built on rigor and control. Chloe was the beautiful, chaotic variable I protected with every ounce of my formidable professional energy. I had my phone set to silent, my focus absolute. This was times our times, time. Then, the fluorescent exit signs flickered, and the door to the side aisle creaked open. The moment was shattered. A man in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, holding a manila envelope, began moving down the aisle toward me. He didn't look like a dance dad. He looked like an eviction notice. I recognized him instantly. Mr. Leonard Finch, a third-rate family law attorney from the suburbs of Westchester, the kind of lawyer who charged $350 an hour, but earned $3.50 worth of respect. Finch stopped directly in front of my seat. He didn't wait for the orchestra to finish the opening overture. He leaned over, blocking my view, and pushed the envelope into my lap. "Mrs. Wallace," he hissed, his breath smelling faintly of stale coffee, "you have been served. Full custody petition. Temporary injunction, effective immediately. My client deems you unfit." The envelope was thick, heavy with the formal language of legal violence. I didn't look at the title page. I didn't need to. I knew the contents before my fingers touched the paper. My ex-husband Robert, the narcissist, was escalating. We had been divorced for $2.5 years, a settlement that had cost me $400,000 in legal fees, but gained me $50% custody. Robert had spent the last 2 years trying to weaponize the courts, viewing Chloe not as a daughter but as an asset to be controlled, leverage to be deployed. He had filed 3 previous petitions, all dismissed, usually claiming my work hours made me neglectful. This time, I knew it was different. This time, I knew he was desperate, which meant he was dangerous. The entire exchange had taken maybe 10 seconds, but in that moment, the entire world tilted. The music, the delicate, hopeful score of Times, the Nutcracker Times, was a grotesque counterpoint to the ugly reality unfolding on the plush velvet seat. I felt the familiar, cold flood of adrenaline, the kind that used to hit me during hostile takeover negotiations. I didn't react with panic. I reacted with operational analysis. My training took over. I looked at the envelope. I looked at Finch, and then I looked past him, up to the stage, where the curtain was finally opening. Chloe was there, tiny and perfect in her white tutu, taking her opening position, and she was looking right at me. She hadn't seen the man hand me the envelope, but she saw the man standing in front of me, blocking her view of her mother, blocking my Time's view of her. She looked confused, then her lower lip began to tremble. Robert's tactical strike was timed perfectly for maximum emotional damage. He wanted to ruin this moment for both of us. He wanted to demonstrate his power. I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't snatch the papers. My movement was slow, deliberate, the way one handles a vial of volatile chemicals. I held the envelope in my left hand. I focused every ounce of my cold, steely resolve onto the lawyer. The witnesses, the parents and grandparents in the rows around us were starting to murmur, looking from the man in the bad suit to the woman standing up during the overture. The lights in the auditorium were dim, but the spotlight was now intensely focused on Time's us asterisk. I looked down at Mr. Finch, who was grinning, savoring the public humiliation he thought he had inflicted. "Tell your client," I said, my voice projected just loud enough to reach the first 6 rows, but remaining low, controlled, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Tell your client that I have the toxicology report from Dr. Ellen Reed, dated last Thursday, November 12 th, indicating a blood alcohol content of $0.18 at $10, $0 a.m., and a trace amount of benzodiazepines." Finch's face went from smug to blank in an instant. The blood drained from his cheeks. He stammered, I don't know what you're talking about, Mrs. Wallace." I pressed the attack, leveraging the second piece of ammunition I had been storing for 3 years. "And tell your client I have the certified copy of his sealed arrest record from $2019 in Middlesex County, Massachusetts. The one for felony possession of stolen goods, he paid a $75,000 settlement to hide. The one that was dismissed only after the $48 hour lockup. The one that makes him, by any definition, a danger to a minor child." I didn't wait for his response. I handed the papers back to him. I looked him straight in the eye, and I delivered the final, non-negotiable instruction. "Now, Mr. Finch, I suggest you remove yourself from my sight. My daughter is on stage, and you are trespassing on the last shred of peace I have left." left. I didn't ask him. I told him. It was an operational directive. Finch, utterly defeated, looking like a wet rat, stumbled backward up the aisle, tripping over someone's cane, and fled the auditorium. I turned around and sat back down, smoothing my skirt. The Sugar Plum Fairy was mid-pirouette. Chloe looked at my seat. She saw the empty space where the man had been. I gave her a small, imperceptible nod. The trembling of her lips stopped. She smiled. She completed her turn flawlessly. The moment of crisis was averted. The performance continued. But for me, the war had just entered its final, most brutal phase. The context for this level of prepared ruthlessness was a history of betrayal that had been slow, insidious, and devastatingly expensive. Robert was the quintessential narcissist. Handsome, charming, a successful, if ethically dubious, real estate developer, and a master manipulator. He didn't cheat with other women. He cheated with control. Our marriage ended when I discovered his financial infidelity. Not that he stole money times from times me, but he hid $1.2 million in offshore accounts during a joint venture, lying about the profits to avoid tax liability and to control the purse strings. When I confronted him with the spreadsheet, my own discovery document, he laughed and called me hysterical. When the divorce settlement was finalized, he lost the money but gained a crippling need for revenge, focused entirely on custody. His strategy was simple: exhaust me financially and emotionally until I surrendered. He knew that money wasn't my weakness. Chloe was. He had hired 3 different lawyers in $2.5 years, cycling them out every time they failed to break me. This time, he had gone too far. The unfit claim was a direct, personal assault on my entire identity as a high-functioning executive and devoted mother. But I hadn't been idle during the $2.5 years of the aftermath. I had been preparing for this day. I learned that when dealing with a sociopath, you can never trust the cessation of hostilities. You must prepare for the permanent war. My validator in this war was Dr. Ellen Reed, a private physician and toxicologist I had known since medical school, and Detective Sergeant Marcus Cole of the NYPD, a friend from my college days. I had hired them both on permanent, discreet retainers. The discovery build phase had begun 6 weeks ago when Robert, in a moment of arrogance, had sent me a text message at $0 a.m. on a Saturday, riddled with spelling errors and claiming he was working late. The text was immediately followed by a blurry photo of him in a dimly lit bar, hoisting a cocktail. The key detail was the timestamp on the photo, $2:58 a.m. I knew his pattern. Robert's working late was code for heavy drinking, often mixed with the anti-anxiety medication he was prescribed for his stress. I immediately called Detective Cole. I need confirmation of an incident, I told him. Middlesex County, $2019 stolen goods. Cole, after 3 hours of leveraging old contacts and navigating sealed records, found the incident. Robert had been arrested after a real estate closing with a briefcase containing $50,000 worth of stolen rare coins. He had paid off the victim and the police liaison to have the records sealed and the charges dropped to a misdemeanor, but the arrest record the original booking sheet with his fingerprints and signature still existed in the archives. Cole sent me a certified, time-stamped copy of the record, delivered by courier service, that same afternoon. Cost, $1,500 in expedited research fees, paid from my personal emergency fund. The blood alcohol content BAC test was trickier. I couldn't simply drug test him myself. I needed a procedural trap. I waited until last Wednesday, when Robert was due to pick up Chloe for his weekend visitation. I knew he had a major business dinner the night before, a high-pressure event that always drove him to heavy drinking. I sent him a non-negotiable email at $0 a.m. that morning, citing an emergency health concern that required both parents to immediately visit a specific pediatrician, Dr. Reed, for a mandatory baseline blood panel. I invented a scare about a recent flu outbreak and a specific rare mutation. Robert, paranoid about his own health and easily manipulated by professional jargon, drove straight to Dr. Reed's private clinic in Midtown. The mandatory blood panel included a full toxicology screen, discreetly ordered by Dr. Reed under the guise of precautionary measures. When the results came back on Friday, they were exactly what I expected, and $0.18 BAC, indicating he was still heavily intoxicated 10 hours after the dinner ended, and a cocktail of benzos. Legally, any BAC over $0.08 is impaired driving. At $0.18, he was near blackout. He had driven to pick up our daughter impaired. Dr. Reed faxed the certified lab results complete with timestamps and chain of custody to my secured line. I paid her $5,000 for the expedited analysis. The price of preemptive victory was high, but the price of losing Chloe was infinite. Now, sitting in the auditorium, the legal papers, the full custody petition based on the unfit mother claim, were reduced to dust. I didn't need to read the allegations. They were irrelevant. Robert had attacked me with lies. I countered with facts. The custody battle was no longer about my work hours. It was about Robert's addiction and criminality. He had made a tactical error by initiating the action times before times I deployed my evidence. evidence. He underestimated my preparedness. He thought I was still the naive wife who cried when confronted. He didn't realize he was dealing with the VP of operations who treated every crisis as a manageable risk with a clear, pre-planned mitigation strategy. I sat through the remainder of the performance, a calm, stoic presence in the third row. When the curtain finally closed and Chloe came bounding off the stage, I was the first one she ran to. Robert, who was supposed to meet her backstage, was nowhere to be seen. He didn't dare show his face. Finch had undoubtedly called him from the parking lot, delivering the grim news. The war had just been irrevocably lost. The day after the recital, the official climax reveal took place. I didn't wait for Robert's lawyer to file the motions. I acted immediately. At $9 a.m., I walked into the office of my family law attorney, Miss Helen Vance, a bulldog of a woman who charged $1,200 an hour and earned every cent. I handed her the custody petition that Finch had tried to serve, and then I handed her times the counterfile asterisk, the toxicology report, the sealed arrest record, and a $300 page dossier I had compiled detailing every instance of Robert's erratic behavior, financial manipulation, and attempts to intimidate me over the past 3 years. Vance looked at the documents, her eyebrows rising with every page. When she got to the BAC level of $0.18 at the time he was scheduled to pick up Chloe, she whistled. "He signed the release for the blood panel?" she asked. "He did," I confirmed, "and the arrest record is certified from the archived file." Vance closed the binder. "We don't wait," she said. "We don't let them set the agenda. We file an emergency cross-petition for full custody and an immediate injunction for supervised visitation, effective immediately. We use his own filing as the trigger." The emergency hearing was convened 48 hours later. Robert, pale and unshaven, sat at the defense table next to Finch, who now looked terrified. I sat with Vance, radiating a cold, calm certainty. Judge Miriam Chen, a stern, no-nonsense judge known for her zero-tolerance policy on parental misconduct, presided. Robert's lawyer began the hearing with the unfit mother claims, my travel schedule, my long hours, my prioritizing the company over the child. It was flimsy, but designed to sting. When it was Vance's turn, she didn't argue against the allegations. She executed the procedural counterstrike. "Your Honor," Vance began, standing up, "we are not here to debate my client's professional schedule. We are here to address the demonstrable, documented danger the petitioner poses to the minor child. We ask the court to review Exhibit C, a certified toxicology report dated November 12. Vance handed the report to the bailiff. The report indicates the petitioner's blood alcohol content was $0.18 at $10 a.m. on the day he was scheduled to retrieve the child for visitation. Furthermore, Exhibit D is a certified police record of a felony arrest that was sealed, showing the petitioner has a documented history of criminal misconduct and lack of judgment." The courtroom went silent. Judge Chen read the reports, her expression hardening with every line. She looked at Robert, who was frantically whispering to Finch. "Mr. Finch," the judge asked, her voice dangerously quiet, "did you review these reports before filing your petition?" Finch, stammering, mumbled, "Your Honor, we were unaware of the toxicology report, and the arrest record was sealed." "Unaware?" Judge Chen repeated, looking over her glasses. "You filed a motion based on the premise of maternal fitness while your client was demonstrably impaired and has a history of felony arrest? That shows a profound lack of due diligence, Mr. Finch, and a reckless disregard for the safety of this child." She didn't let Finch respond. She looked at Robert. "Mr. Wallace, your petition is hereby denied. Furthermore, based on the evidence of extreme intoxication and the concealed felony history, I am granting a temporary injunction to the cross-petition. Effective immediately, your visitation rights are suspended until a comprehensive psychological evaluation and mandatory court-monitored substance abuse treatment are completed. Any visitation thereafter will be supervised by a court-appointed professional." Robert erupted. "This is a setup," he shouted, jumping to his feet. "She's lying. She set me up." Judge Chen pounded her gavel. "Silence." Another outburst. "Mr. Wallace, and I will find you in contempt." Robert's face, contorted with rage, was a clear visual cue for the witnesses, the court staff, the social worker, and even the stunned Finch that they were dealing with. A volatile, unstable individual. Not the wronged father he claimed to be. The emotional arc was complete. The victim had become the victor. The persecutor was trapped by his own facts. The aftermath was swift and comprehensive. Robert's legal team collapsed. Finch withdrew from the case immediately, filing a motion citing an irreparable breakdown of attorney-client privilege. Robert had to hire a high-priced defense attorney, Miss Acrosti. Eleanor Thorne, known for handling corporate misconduct, which only confirmed to the judge that this was not about custody, but about control. The social media campaign Robert tried to launch, claiming I had bribed the judge, fell flat. I didn't have to counter him. The facts spoke for themselves. I received full custody, with supervised visitation for Robert mandated for the next 2 years. The final divorce order was amended to include a permanent morality clause, stating that any relapse or new legal issue would result in the permanent suspension of all visitation rights. Robert had lost the war he started, and he had paid a premium for the privilege. He continued to send me manipulative text text messages times. You're destroying our family, you cold witch. You don't care about Chloe times. But I simply forwarded them to Vance and the social worker, labeling them evidence of lack of remorse. The echo of his voice was now just white noise, proof that my walls were working. The final phase, the resolution, was less about the legal system and more about the structural integrity of my life and Chloe's. We moved, not far, but enough to sever the physical connection to the old life. I bought a brownstone in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. I changed Chloe's school to the Northwood Academy's main campus, removing her from the small recital environment where the serving incident had occurred. I hired a private security detail for 6 months, a quiet man named Greg, who managed the perimeter and ensured Robert could not get within the $500 feet of the restraining order. The total cost of the divorce and subsequent defense was $650,000, a massive financial hit, but it was an investment in permanent peace. I viewed it as the ultimate insurance policy. I had traded money for safety. I didn't let the trauma of the battle define Chloe. I made the procedural justice visible to her. I explained it to her not as daddy is bad, but as sometimes people get sick, and mommy has to be the strongest person in the room to keep us safe. I showed her the new house, the new school, the new life I had built for us. I taught her about boundaries. I taught her about verification. She understood. She was a practical child. 5 years later, Chloe was 14. She was thriving, a serious student and a brilliant dancer, now focusing on modern choreography. Robert was a ghost. His supervised visits had tapered off, becoming less frequent, then stopping entirely after his last monitored visit ended with him yelling at the supervisor. He had returned to his old patterns, now compounded by professional failure. I heard through Detective Cole that Robert had lost his real estate license due to ethical violations related to his sealed felony and had moved out of state, working a low-level sales job. The echo of his existence was faint, like a distant, irrelevant radio signal. I was promoted to COO of my firm. My professional life was built on my known capacity for methodical, unemotional crisis management. My reputation as a survivor who built emotional firewalls was an asset. I still spoke to Dr. Reed and Detective Cole every 6 months, a procedural check-in, maintaining the network that had saved me. I had achieved the peaceful philosophical resolution. I didn't hate Robert. I didn't wish him ill. I simply accepted his existence as a resolved liability. The final, ultimate resolution came on Chloe's 16th birthday. She had been invited to a major summer dance program in New York City, a dream, opportunity. She needed a passport, which required parental signatures. I contacted Robert's lawyer, his fourth, an overworked public defender, to arrange the required documentation. Robert refused to sign. He saw it as his final chance to exert control. He demanded a reconciliation meeting with Chloe. He demanded I drop the supervision order. I didn't engage. I simply went back to my resources. I found a loophole in the original custody agreement that allowed a single parent to obtain a passport for a minor when the other parent demonstrated willful neglect or refusal to participate in the child's established educational pursuits. I submitted a motion attaching the final judgment, the supervision order, and a letter from Chloe's dance instructor detailing the mandatory nature of the program. The judge signed the order within 2 days. Robert was stripped of his last remaining shred of control. He was notified by his public defender. The echo I received wasn't from him directly. It was a post on an obscure social media channel he used, a bitter, self-pitying rant about the system and the vicious ex-wife who stole my life. Chloe saw it, scrolling through her own feed. She showed it to me, not with sadness, but with a detached curiosity. "Mom," she asked, looking at the screen, "why does he always make himself the victim?" I took the phone, and I looked at the picture of Robert, older, bloated, still trying to project an image of success. "Because, sweetheart," I said, putting the phone down, "some people never learn that the facts are the only things that matter. And our facts are solid." She nodded, a look of mature understanding on her face. She closed the app. "Can we go look at point shoes now? I need a new pair before the program." "Absolutely," I said. "Let's go." I had won the war, but the greatest victory was raising a daughter who understood that facts trumped fiction and that her mother's strength was not a weakness, but an unbreachable wall of protection. We left the house, the sun setting, moving forward into a future that was entirely and unequivocally ours. The signing of the passport order was not a moment of loud celebration, but a quiet, almost clerical confirmation of the new reality. It occurred in the summer of $2,035, exactly $5.5 years after the ballet recital. The finality of it was clinical. A $20 page court order, stamped and signed by Judge Chen, explicitly stating Robert Wallace's willful failure to comply with the child's educational and extracurricular necessities. His signature was legally superfluous. His absence was the only signature that mattered. The process cost me $3,800 in legal fees to draft and file the motion, but it was the final, non-negotiable insurance premium paid against his influence. I tracked the expense under the ledger category, asset protection, minor, and then, for the first time in 6 years, I deleted the entire category from my internal budget. The firewall was complete. The focus shifted entirely from defense to growth. My professional life accelerated into the vacuum left by by the consumed emotional energy. Within 2 years of the final custody order, I engineered the successful $1.2 billion acquisition of a German biopharma competitor, leveraging my reputation for methodical, ruthless crisis management. My firm's board, which had observed my personal battle with a detached, professional respect, promoted me to chief executive officer. My annual compensation package, including stock options and bonuses, exceeded $12.5 million. The increase in capital was not a symbol of luxury. It was a deeper layer of security. I invested $10 million of that first-year bonus into a fully discretionary trust for Chloe, shielded from any future legal claims, structured specifically to be inaccessible until her $30th birthday. The legal fee for setting up this particular structure, managed by a Swiss firm, was $45,000. I paid it immediately. I wanted a guarantee that even if Robert somehow managed to claw his way back to solvency, or if he discovered a distant, previously unknown relative to file a derivative suit, every asset I had secured for my daughter would be beyond his grasp, locked behind a series of international procedural barriers. This was not a life built on sentiment. It was a life built on meticulous, interlocking legal clauses. The validator network remained fully functional, running on a low-power, automated maintenance schedule. I continued to pay Dr. Reed, my toxicologist and physician, a $10,000 annual retainer for consultative services, ensuring she would be available to testify, with immediate access to all archived lab results, should Robert ever attempt to reopen the case. I did the same with Detective Sergeant Marcus Cole, now promoted to lieutenant, paying him $5,000 annually for archival and security review, guaranteeing the sealed felony arrest record remained certified, documented, and ready for immediate deployment. Miss Helen Vance, my attorney, became a personal friend and now served as the primary legal counsel for my firm, moving from crisis litigation to corporate law. She charged $1,500 an hour for corporate work, a justified increase, but she offered me a deeply discounted personal retainer of $2,000 a month, a professional courtesy earned through shared warfare. The constant maintenance of this network was the philosophical backbone of my resolution. Peace is not the absence of war, but the readiness to win any war at a moment's notice. Chloe, meanwhile, was flourishing in the absence of the constant psychological friction. She was accepted to the dual degree program at Yale University, combining a major in economics with a minor in art history, a choice that explicitly rejected the chaotic, self-serving world of Robert's real estate development. The tuition, room, and board for her first year totaled $88,000. Robert, whose child support obligation had been court-mandated at $1,500 per month, had paid exactly $0 since the supervised visitation was suspended. The total accumulated arrears were $81,000. I never pursued it. The cost of the legal action to collect the debt was negligible to me, but the emotional cost of re-engaging him, of giving him an avenue for contact, was too high. I let the arrears sit as a frozen liability on my private ledger, a monument to his failure as a parent, a $0 balance that was far more satisfying than any collected check. I paid Chloe's tuition with a single wire transfer from my personal account, documenting the transaction under the label unencumbered future investment. The true inverted outcome manifested during her graduation from Yale at the age of $22. Chloe had invited several of Robert's extended family members, his sister, Aunt Carol, and his elderly mother, both of whom had offered superficial support to Robert during the initial custody battle, but had since retreated in shame. I watched them from the distance, sitting with my own parents, maintaining a cordial but strictly professional demeanor. After the ceremony, Aunt Carol approached me, tears in her eyes. "Clara," she whispered, "Robert is not doing well. He asked me to tell you how beautiful Chloe is. He regrets everything." This was the echo I had been waiting for, the proxy plea for emotional validation, the final, desperate attempt to reinsert himself into the narrative of our success. I looked at Carol, who had betrayed me with half-truths and passive aggression years ago. I didn't smile. I didn't harden my voice. I simply executed a well-rehearsed administrative response. "Carol," I said, "Robert is not part of this family's narrative. His contact with Chloe is restricted by a standing court order. If he has a genuine legal matter, he needs to contact Miss Vance at her corporate office. Otherwise, this conversation is over." I didn't offer sympathy. I didn't offer forgiveness. I offered a business card. The reaction was precisely what I intended. Shocked silence, the immediate understanding that the old Clara, the emotional, vulnerable Clara, was permanently offline. I watched Carol retreat. Her mission failed. The victory wasn't just in the words, it was in the complete administrative detachment. Years passed, becoming a blur of successful quarterly reports, quiet family holidays, and the relentless, fulfilling work of building a life where chaos had no foothold. I remarried at $47 to a retired naval engineer, David, a man whose life, like mine, was built on structure, precision, and verifiable data. Our wedding was held in the backyard, a small ceremony with $15 guests. I did not wear white. I wore a suit the color of reinforced concrete. The only dramatic incident incident of the day was when a drone, flying low over the property line, attempted to capture aerial photographs. I had anticipated this kind of petty intrusion. My security team, hired from a specialized firm, activated a $5 electronic jamming sequence. The drone immediately lost signal and crashed harmlessly into a neighbor's tree. The cost of the jamming equipment was $8,000. $8,000. A wise, preemptive investment against the possibility of a final photographic echo from the past. The true test of my emotional firewall arrived exactly $12 years after the recital incident. Chloe was $25 living in New York and working as a financial analyst for a major investment bank. I was $52. I received a call not from Robert, but from Detective Cole. His voice was grim. Clara, I have an update on Robert Wallace. He was arrested 2 days ago in Reno, Nevada. Felony charge. He paused, letting the weight of the word settle. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. It's not sealed this time. It's public record. He was in a bar fight, highly intoxicated. His public defender contacted me. They found my number on his old police records. They're trying to use his previous sealed history as a pattern of behavior to plead down to a lesser charge. I thought you should know. This was it, the final echo, the definitive implosion. Robert hadn't just faded away. He had self-destructed, not quietly, but with a public, violent finality. I didn't panic. I didn't feel a flicker of schadenfreude. I felt the deep, cold satisfaction of accurate forecasting. His predictable trajectory had been completed. Thank you, Marcus, I said calmly. Do I need to be concerned about extradition or any legal responsibility? Cole confirmed, no, this is Nevada's problem. He is permanently out of your jurisdiction. He is financially indigent and has no legal standing to involve you or Chloe. I just wanted to close the file on my end. Consider it closed, I replied. I thanked him and I hung up the phone. I immediately called Helen Vance. Helen, I instructed, I need a final, legally binding confirmation that Robert Wallace's new felony conviction, now a public record, permanently voids any and all remaining rights or privileges under the $2,030 custody agreement. I want a final motion filed to update the public record. Vance did not ask why. She simply replied, consider it done, Clara. I'll charge you for a single hour of my time, $1,500. The final legal motion was filed and granted within a week. The document, the permanent termination of parental rights and privileges, was the capstone of my defensive strategy. I didn't show it to Chloe. She didn't need to see it. Her resolution had been internal. Later that week, I saw her for dinner. She was talking excitedly about a major deal she was closing at the bank. She was confident, analytical, and utterly secure. She had inherited my capacity for procedural rigor, but with a lightness I had to fight to acquire. As we were finishing dinner, she looked at me and said, Mom, I was thinking about Dad the other day. It's strange. He feels like a fictional character now, like someone in a case study, not a real person. I smiled. He is, sweetheart, I said. He is a case study in what happens when you prioritize emotion and chaos over fact and integrity. I reached across the table and touched her hand. The resolution was not the $12.5 million salary or the successful corporate acquisition or even the final legal document. The resolution was the peace in Chloe's eyes. It was the knowledge that I had taken a moment of public, profound betrayal and transformed it into a foundation of unshakable security. The $650,000 I spent on the war was the best investment of my life. I had won custody. I had won the legal battle. But most importantly, I had won the right to indifference. Robert Wallace, the narcissist, was permanently relegated to the status of a low-grade, resolved liability in a closed ledger, a final entry in a file I would never open again. The last $12 years of peace proved that the facts were indeed solid, and the emotional firewall was indestructible. The only remaining sound was the quiet, measured rhythm of my own life, built brick by careful, intentional brick. End of script. The administrative finality of a human life is surprisingly inexpensive when stripped of sentiment. The call came on a Tuesday in November, exactly 10 years after Robert's felony arrest in Nevada. I was 62 years old, sitting in the sunroom of the vacation home David and I had purchased in the Hamptons, a property acquired for $4.2 million in cash, title held in a blind trust. The phone rang at $14 a.m. The caller ID displayed, Washoe County Medical Examiner. I didn't flinch. I had anticipated this call for a decade. I answered with the same professional cadence I used for board meetings. This is Clara Vance. A tired voice on the other end. A clerk named Mrs. Higgins verified my identity. Mrs. Vance, we have you listed as the emergency contact on an old booking sheet for a Robert Wallace. We've been unable to locate any other next of kin. Mr. Wallace passed away last night at $2 a.m. due to complications from liver failure and pneumonia. He died in state custody. I listened to the details. Robert was 58 years old. He had died in a county hospital ward, indigent, with assets totaling less than $50. The clerk paused, waiting for the expected reaction, the gasp, the tears, the questions about suffering. I offered none. I looked at the spreadsheet open on my laptop, a quarterly review of my charitable foundation's endowment. I see, I said. Thank you for notifying me. I assume you are calling regarding the disposition of the remains. Mrs. Higgins sounded relieved. relieved. Yes, ma'am. Since he is indigent, the state will handle a pauper's burial unless the family wishes to claim the body. However, since you are the ex-wife and there is a daughter listed, my daughter is not to be contacted, I interrupted, my voice dropping to that familiar, steely register. She has no legal or emotional relationship with the deceased. I will handle the disposition. I didn't do this for Robert. I did it to ensure that Chloe, who is currently in London negotiating a merger for her bank, would never have to answer a phone call from a Nevada morgue. I pulled out my credit card, the black titanium one with the high limit. I will cover the cost of a direct cremation. No service, no viewing, no urn. I want the ashes disposed of in accordance with state regulations for unclaimed remains. What is the fee? The fee is $850 for the cremation and $125 for the administrative filing, Mrs. Higgins said. Total of $975. Charge it, I said. I will email you the authorization form within 5 minutes. Do not contact my daughter. Do not release his name to the press until the transaction is complete. Is that understood? Yes, Mrs. Vance, the clerk whispered. I hung up. I opened my email, drafted the authorization, signed it digitally, and sent it. The transaction cleared at $11, $22 a.m. I logged the expense in my personal ledger under miscellaneous legacy closure, $975. It was less than I spent on my monthly landscaping bill. I closed the laptop. I looked out at the ocean, gray and churning in the autumn wind. Robert Wallace had ceased to exist. He wasn't a tragedy. He was a line item that had finally been reconciled to zero. The true resolution, however, wasn't the cremation. It was the conversation I had with Chloe 3 days later. She had flown in from London for the weekend, staying in the guest wing. We were in the kitchen, making coffee. She looked tired but triumphant, the adrenaline of her deal still humming in her veins. Mom, she said, leaning against the marble counter, you'll never guess who tried to friend me on LinkedIn last week. Someone named Wallace, a cousin, I think. From his side, she said his, with a casual detachment like she was talking about a weather system that had passed. I poured the coffee, watching the steam rise. I handled it, I said simply. You won't be hearing from that side of the family again. Chloe looked at me. She didn't ask what I did. She didn't ask if he was dead. She knew me. She knew that if I said it was handled with the permanence of a geological event. She took a sip of her coffee. Okay, she said. Thanks. Then she smiled, a bright, unburdened smile. So, about the wedding. David and I were thinking, no big speeches, just a toast. And I want to make sure the prenup is signed before we send the invites. Can you send me the name of that lawyer you used for the trust? The Swiss one? I looked at my daughter. She was 35 years old. She was getting married to a man she loved, a man who was kind, solvent, and transparent, but she was approaching the contract of marriage with the same procedural justice I had drilled into her. She wasn't cynical. She was prepared. She understood that a prenup wasn't an insult to love. It was an insurance policy for peace. Of course, I said, I'll email you his contact info. He charges $1,200 an hour, but he's worth it. Perfect, she said. I'll put it in the budget. We stood there in the quiet kitchen, two women who had built a fortress out of facts. I realized then that the revenge drama was truly over. The narcissist hadn't just lost the custody battle. He had lost the genetic war. His chaos had ended with him. Chloe carried none of it. She carried my resilience, my logic, my steel. That night, I went into my study. I opened the physical file cabinet where I kept the few remaining paper records of the Wallace Wars, the custody order, the passport motion, the restraining orders. I took the folder labeled Robert Wallace. It was thin now. I walked to the fireplace. I didn't light a match with dramatic flair. I simply tossed the folder onto the logs I had already ignited for warmth. I watched the paper curl and blacken. The certified arrest record, the toxicology report, the final cremation receipt. It all turned to ash and floated up the chimney, dispersing into the cold night air. I went back to the living room where David was reading a book. He looked up and smiled. Everything okay? He asked. Everything is perfect, I said. The accounts are closed. I sat down next to him, picked up my own book, and began to read. The silence in the room was not empty. It was full. It was the heavy, luxurious silence of a life that belongs entirely to the person living it. The variance report was final. The deviation was zero. The story was done.